I'm Elliot Davis. Bi-State commissioners are supposed to meet tomorrow behind closed doors in this building to discuss taking over the Delmar Loop trolley. Why one commissioner I talked to tonight says that would be a terrible deal for taxpayers.
Every extra dollar that we can find needs to go to security and improving the system that we have right now.
But the brass at Bi-State sees things differently.
Set up as a tourist attraction, okay? It's failed. Only 1 year open, $51 million. And now they want Bi-State to take it over, but then we're on the hook. I sit on Bi-State's board. Why in the world would I want to do that when we have our own problems?
I believe that we should be spending every single extra tax dollar we have. We already have budgetary problems on fixing our security. We had to cut a lot of bus lines out for people who need them. Why are we spending money in U City? Roach also said that he would get back to the board.
But Commissioner Derrick Keith Cox from Madison County says Toby Roach recently had a surprise for commissioners after all this time, telling them he's a member of the Loop Trolley Board of Directors.
He's negotiated with the trolley board as president of Bi-State to use our federal funds to bail out the trolley. Who's he negotiating with? Himself? So I think it's a conflict of interest. You can't negotiate as president of Bi-State. You can't negotiate with the same board that you're sitting on and using our funds.
Clearly, CEO Toby Roach is trying to come up with a plan that'll be easier for his commissioners to swallow. But Bi-State Commissioner Cox from Madison County not sold on this deal. He says it's no better than the first idea to bail out the trolley. Bi-State Commissioner Derrick Keith Cox takes another view of the trolley's fate. Bi-State was toying with the idea of taking over the failed trolley, but in the end rejected the idea.
Shelled out nearly $1 million to get to this point. Elliot Davis talked to the CEO of Bi-State, who calls it a good deal, but at least one Bi-State commissioner has some doubts.
Commissioner Derrick Keith Cox from Madison County, not so sure.
Is this security studies, the two studies, was that worth our $900,000?
No, not so far, because it hasn't even come to the board to really dive in and to discuss and to actually have a vote. So we just spent a lot of money, and I guess it makes us feel good.
What don't you like about disarming security?
Because I think it makes things less safe. I think the more trained people, good guys with a firearm, the better.
The incident happened Tuesday at the Fairview Heights Metrolink station. The guard was providing security when he encountered an intoxicated subject. I talked to Bi-State Commissioner Derrick Keith Cox of Madison County, a frequent critic of the new security plan.
Our officer was physically attacked for simply asking the suspect to move on the platform. Think about this. All right? If it was an armed police officer, they just asked somebody to move. Do you think that armed officer would have been attacked? I bet not. All right? The criminals, the bad guys, see our security as extremely weak, and they're taking advantage of it.
Bi-State Development Commissioner Derrick Keith Cox called a special security subcommittee meeting to discuss Army Metro security guards.
First, we need to decide what do we think as a board is the best way to protect our riders and to protect our security officers.
It'll come on Fox 2 News at 9.
Tonight on Your Paid For, the murder of a Metrolink security guard a week ago, sparking new demands from a Bi-State commissioner to give guards their guns back. Last April, Bi-State revised its policy, taking away guns from security guards. But Bi-State Commissioner Derrick Keith Cox is angry that Cook had to work with no gun in this dangerous city.
What is your reaction about what has happened with the guard being killed?
It's just devastating. When you see pictures of, this security officer and his family and his two daughters, it's absolutely devastating. We've got to do something about this. People know that our security is unarmed. It's a soft target.
I questioned Bi-State President CEO Toby Roach, who helped push the new policy that came about after nearly $1 million in studies on how to improve safety on the trouble-plagued Metrolink.
Toby Roach is saying that it's under federal law, the guards can have guns. How do you answer that?
Doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense to me. But if that's their new position, that now we can't have weapons Again, we were doing it for decades before this. Did the law just change? Because I certainly haven't heard about it. This gentleman that was murdered, he was an Iraq war veteran, a Marine. Tell me that he shouldn't have had a weapon to defend himself. If he had a gun, I honestly believe that he would be alive today. That's what I believe.
Commissioner Cox says Bi-State agreed to his call for a special meeting on the safety and weapons policy. That virtual meeting is going to be held tomorrow at 9 a.m.
I talked to the pastor of his church today who said many have reached out to him to say, how can he do that job without having all the proper tools, one of which would be a firearm to protect himself? Well, one member of the Bi-State Board sees it exactly the same way.
The Safety Committee of the Bi-State Board that oversees Metrolink held an emergency meeting on Monday. Board member Derrick Cox wanted an item on the agenda to raise the issue of arming security officers, but it was left off.
I want to talk about the agenda first.
Do I have a motion to go into an executive session?
I'll make your motion.
Have a second? Point of order. Point of order. Point of order.
In the wake of James Cook's shooting death while working as a Metrolink security officer, Cox wants to see security officers allowed to carry firearms.
The only reason I'm so passionate about this, we've got to stop something like this from happening in the future.
One member of the Bi-State Board says, hey, it's a no-brainer. We got to change that agreement.
We were told today, it is a war zone out there. Sadly, it is so sad. And we live in one of the most dangerous cities. To stick one of our officers out there in this system without a weapon to defend themselves or the riders doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
State Commissioner Derrick Cox has pushed for action and is pleased a plan that would close the system can now move forward.
Basically, you have to walk through one single access point at each platform just to ride. So to make it easy for people to understand, if you're a rider, you purchase a ticket, then you go through a turnstile-like system, sometimes with a metal detector or a guard there, just to get onto the platform.
New tonight, Bi-State is moving to a new phase of its security plan to try and make Metrolink safer. Fox 2's Elliot Davis caught up with the head of Bi-State, who says they may be ready to consider measures that they had rejected in the past.
Road says Bi-State is also bringing on extra security, and they plan to upgrade security surveillance at all its stations. Derrick Cox is a member of the Bi-State Board of Commissioners and is a frequent critic of the way Bi-State has handled security on Metrolink. He's all in with a new plan. You've been pushing for this.
Absolutely, because see, Metrolink has made it easy, in my opinion, an easy spot for the bad guys to do their dirty work. We've got to change that. This is one way to change that, forcing the customers to purchase a ticket, go through an access point, turnstile-like system with a police officer armed just to get on the platform. That makes it uncomfortable for the bad guys to do their dirty work. It forces them elsewhere.
Toby Roach is not saying how much the improvements are going to cost, but Derrick Cox says it'll likely run into the tens of millions of dollars, with a lot of that money coming from the federal CARES Act.
On Fox, a major development in efforts to make Metrolink much safer.
Bi-State Development has given the agency the green light to find funding for turnstiles and other safety measures.
People will start riding once they feel safer and once the system's safer, and it will generate more revenue.
The turnstiles, you can monitor what's going on versus the free fall. It's just too much pandemonium and chaos going on.
Problems. The new development causing a prominent Bi-State critic to change course. Here's Elliot Davis with tonight's You Paid For It.
Although Derrick Cox sits on the Bi-State Board of Commissioners, he was still one of the biggest critics of security on Bi-State and of its CEO, Toby Roach. He says, with the COVID money, there's hope on the horizon for effective security measures that should have been implemented years ago.
Now, I've been pushing for years, Elliot, for having a turnstile-like system, and I believe that the board is finally coming along, and I've been the biggest criticizer of, how we've handled a lot of security issues, but on this issue, if we're ready to put turnstiles in place and folks have to go through a turnstile just to get on the platform, I applaud that decision and Metrolink and moving in that direction.
Bi-State should look at turnstiles, and Bi-State rejected that idea. Have you guys done an about face? And people like Derrick, Pete Cox had suggested that as well.
Sometimes, especially with the change of the pandemic and where we are in ridership, we should be looking at new ideas. We need to listen to all those voices, including yours, including the public, about how we can change our system.
And I actually think that Mr. Roach is doing a good job at getting the public and some businesses to buy in to this idea. It's absolutely necessary.
Wait a minute, did I hear you say Toby Roach was doing a good job on something?
Listen, I will
and
tip.
You've been one of his biggest critics.
I have been. I absolutely have been. I will tip my hat, though, when somebody is moving in the right direction.
Of course, I take that compliment any day. I'm going to work my butt off on making it better, and I appreciate both the criticism and the compliment.